Good morning, Knicks Nation. Today is Monday, the 26th day of May, 2025. It's Memorial Day in the United States. I hope you're enjoying your Memorial Day weekend. This being the last day, if you're fortunate enough to be off from your labors today, I hope you enjoy the day and be safe and healthy with your family. I hope that your family is safe and healthy and that the needs of you and your family in terms of food, shelter, clothing, as well as health are being met today. Blessings on all the military veterans that put their lives on the line to protect the honor of their country. Blessings on the ones that didn't come back, that are at rest. Blessings on the ones that did, that are severely injured. Blessings on the ones that are homeless. Blessings on the ones that are whole. Blessings on all our military veterans, because they don't do it for politics. They do it for honor. And so when you have that as your conviction, you have to respect that. And so, yes, blessings on the military veterans. I hope that them and their families are blessed today. Blessings on those that work in the area of health, trying to help people heal, and those that work with first responders to try to save people's lives. Those also that pick up garbage, keep our places clean, and those that make deliveries for our convenience. Double blessings on the men and women out here trying to help rescue, deliver, and recover the teenagers and children that are victims of child molestation and pedophilia, people that are victims of pornography and child pornography, prostitution, child prostitution, human trafficking, and sex slavery. Double curses on the perpetrators, profiteers, and perverts that create the demands that cause these industries to exist. Finally, double blessings on the homeless. More than 700,000 men, women, children, families, senior citizens, and veterans homeless in the United States. Blessings upon them. Theirs is the kingdom. There was a basketball game in Indiana last night. The New York Knicks came from 20 points down to defeat the Indiana Pacers. Tom Thibodeau, out of an act of desperation, trying to make sure he gets his team back in this series, started MitchRob last night. Stats were very interesting. MitchRob played the same minutes he played Friday, but he played them in the starter's role. Josh Hart played the same minutes he usually plays, but he played them off the bench. And this is typical. Before Josh was starting, this was pretty much the way it was. But obviously, Karl Anthony Towns was the difference maker down the stretch. He was quiet for 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, he erupted. And that's what happens when you have an all-NBA player. They're liable to do stuff like that. Now, there was other important changes aside from that. Thibs went with Delon Wright, the first guard off the bench, the first player off the bench that was not the regular rotation was Delon Wright. The second was Landry Shamet. They were very key when Jalen Brunson went down with 5 fouls. They were very key. And the thing is, in the 3 games that we have played, the Knicks have played against Indiana in this playoffs, Brunson had 43 points and we lost. Brunson had 36 points and we lost. Brunson last night had 23 and we won. Why do I bring that up? Because everybody that's watching, that's in the league, knows that Brunson is the head of the snake. So they've been attacking him. And they've been forcing him or inducing him to force his offense. It has not been pretty. But because it was actually a blessing that he got in foul trouble, because that caused Wright and Shamet to come off the bench, and they were led by Deuce McBride, who played 15 minutes last night. There was pretty evenly distributed minutes, but the defense, again, Shamet scored 3. Wright scored 2. Deuce scored 9. But together they were plus 11. Because it was the defense that disrupted the Indiana flow. Indiana got a 20-point lead because they got in a flow, and the Knicks was in a funk on the defensive end. It was frustrating to watch. That was the second quarter. And then the Knicks started to chip away. Actually, when they were down 20, what bothered me more was Tyrese Halliburton celebrating early. That bothered me because it was too early to celebrate than anything. But I knew the Knicks were going to start chipping away. In fact, they work best when that's the case. So I was wanting them to get it down to 15. Then when they got it down to 15, okay, now get it down to 10. And then get it into single digits. By the time they got in the fourth quarter, it was an 8-point game. And then it was the Knicks game to take. Brunson came in, as he does in the best moments, in the clutch. Because by that time, Deuce was a threat. Cat was a threat, right? OG played tremendously. 4 3-pointers, along with the usual grown-ass man lockdown defense. He ended the game with 16 very efficient points and very well played defense. And, of course, Mikal Bridges, the frustrating wing that we have, the road runner. He was missing some shots he would normally hit. It's frustrating to watch, but he was steady Eddie down the stretch. And then, of course, Deuce, Josh Hart, 10 boards off the bench, 4 assists, big-time rebounds in the fourth quarter. That's what you got him there for. So when we started seeing it was Wright and Shamet that triggered that defense. MitchRob was out there with him, and Karl-Anthony Towns was out there with him. Like I said, the 2 giants and 3 midgets, and they came through. So we probably, for the rest of this series, will see this rotation. You're going to see the starting 5 as you saw it, plus the 4 guys coming off the bench as you saw it. Why? Because this matchup very well with Indiana. Okay? So we had the team that was put together with Towns being the last piece late in the summer, early in the fall last year. That was built to beat Boston. And it's right to try to beat Boston because they were the number 1 team. They're the defending champion. And then all of a sudden this year they were number 2 in the East because Cleveland came out of nowhere. But the team was built to beat Boston. And they did. But they weren't built to beat Indiana. Now they are. So, and again, it's not offense. It's defense. Everything with the Knicks is predicated on defense. And so when the Knicks used when Thibs used Wright and Shamet and figured out that they could, because both of them are disruptive defenders, and figured out with Deuce and then, of course, Towns and MitchRob, that they can get business done against them, that was really, really good. The Knicks started off the game very well. They let go of the rope a little bit at the end of the first quarter defensively. And then, Indiana made a big run in the second quarter. I actually liked that because, and even the announcers, and, Reggie Miller, who spent his whole career with the Pacers, and Stan Van Gundy, a longtime Knick hater, they were basically coaching them from the broadcast booth. They should do this, do that. It was like, why don't you just go on the sidelines and get a clipboard? Because that's what they was doing, right? And I actually put it on silent. But even they said they're trying to get the knockout punch right now. See, it was like the Tyson haymaker in the second quarter. This is the league. If you want to get a safe lead, you need to be up by 40. 20-point lead in this league is not enough. And Thibs knows that, okay? Having been on both sides of it. And he said, no lead is safe in this league. And he's right. And so when they were all hyped, celebrating, it was a 20-point lead, and I was watching the Knicks go from 15, 17, 15, I said, you're celebrating too early. Okay, if I was a Pacers fan, I would be mad because they were celebrating too early. Of course, the Knicks came back and beat them at the end. Testicular fortitude again for the Knicks. Now, big game tomorrow. I don't know. I thought yesterday, I said on the podcast yesterday, that the Knicks would win that game because of the starting of Mitchell Robinson. And and my question was, if I'm Rick Carlisle, how do I counter the Knicks? How do I counter what they did? See, and this is the thing. This is the similarity between Indiana and Boston. They both play one way. Indiana beat you by wearing you down with their depth. Boston beat you by bombing you out the gym with threes. Okay? And once you neutralize that strength, you can beat them. And so with Boston, once we neutralized their three-point shooters, like Wright and Tatum, once we neutralize the 3-point threat from the main sources, then they had the series. With Indiana, once you neutralize the depth that they put out there with Wright and Shamet, you could take the series. So this next game is pivotal. Let me say right now, if the Knicks win this game tomorrow, which I'm going to give them a good 65% chance to win this game tomorrow. I gave them 70% chance to win yesterday. I might even push that up a little bit, but I'm going to be conservative. I always try to do that. So I'm going to give them a 65% chance against 35 for the Pacers to win this game tomorrow, because I don't see how the Pacers are going to be able to counter New York. What they do and what they've been doing is they set traps in the pick and roll to victimize guys like Brunson. Smart, right? They set traps in the pick and roll to victimize Deuce. They kept getting Miles Turner switched on Deuce. Thibs called timeout, and then they figured that out. And it was Towns' fault, because Towns kept allowing it. But what happened after the timeout is Towns would switch back to his man and let the guard get back on the man. What the danger of that is that you give the shooter a split second to raise up, right? Which is what they're trying to stop. And Indiana knew that. They would say, okay, you're going to try to stop us from giving that quick split second to raise up. Therefore, we're going to get a mismatch with it's raining men on either Brunson or Deuce. So Miles Turner was taking advantage of that in the first half. But when the Knicks adjusted, and that's what the playoffs are about, adjustments. When the Knicks adjusted to that, that shut that off. Okay, that shut that off. Turner ended up going 1 for 6 from 3, because most of his points were on the midgets he would get mismatches on, which he's supposed to do. But again, the Knicks counted that and shut it off. So now on Tuesday, they're going to try that again. That's all they could do. They're going to try that again. And they started yesterday, of course. They had McConnell, Shepard especially, and McConnell were really putting pressure on the Knicks backcourt. And at one point in the fourth quarter, when Brunson was going to try to bring him up, Josh Hart went and got it from him and waved him off. I don't know if you noticed that. He went and got the ball and waved him off. And then Brunson got it and just jogged up the court. And then Brunson got an open look. See? And once they figured out that game, don't fight that pressure. Use your forwards to fight that pressure. And that's what they did. And then when Delon Wright and Shamet came in, they didn't give them the pressure because they were only really focused on Brunson. Once Delon Wright and Shamet came in, and of course we still had Deuce, they wasn't putting the 94-foot pressure on, because those guys were breaking it, number one, and they weren't trying to attack it one-on-one like Brunson would do. And so then they backed off, and that allowed the Knicks. Now, Indiana still played elite defense. There was one sequence where the Knicks didn't even get into their offense with like 6 seconds left in the clock because of the pressure that Indiana put on. But the Knicks would adjust to it. And that's what you got to do when you're playing. The Thibs would adjust to it, and then they beat it. So the Knicks got to come correct tomorrow. If they do, this series could still end in 6 games. I know people are saying 7. But if the Knicks beat them in Indiana tomorrow and they're starting Mitchell Robinson and they got now they got a 9-man rotation, this series could end in 6 games. I'm going to tell you that right now. This series and it's not like Indiana going to fold. They're not going to fold. They're going to fight all the way through. They're going to fight for 48 minutes like they've been doing. But they celebrate too early when they get ahead. They celebrate too early. They're not businesslike and methodical like Brunson and the Knicks are. So let's see what happens. Tomorrow's a big game. If the Knicks lose tomorrow, they still go down 3-1. Okay, that's a bad situation. But if they win tomorrow in Indiana, I think the Knicks could win this thing in 6 still. I really do think they could still win in 6, because now they have found the matchup formula. That's really what it is. They have found the matchup formula to beat Indiana. Once it's again, I like to liken it to boxing. Floyd Mayweather, the only undefeated champion aside from Rocky Marciano, he would take like the first 3 or 4 rounds to study his opponent and figure him out. I think Crawford does the same thing. Once they figure out what their opponent is doing, they set up the opponent and they use the proper counters and defensive counters to hit the opponent because they figured him out. The Knicks have figured out Indiana. It took them a minute to figure out Boston. They figured out what happened last night, and it was the blessing of Brunson having to sit that caused Thibs. First, Deuce ends up with 3 fouls in the first, second quarter, something like that. He had 3 fouls, and he had to sit. And then Brunson got 3, and he had to sit. So now you bring Deuce back, but you bring him back with Delon Wright and Shamet, and those cats are pesky on the defensive end of the floor. And so there you go. And so the Knicks have solved Indiana. I'm not calling it the series yet because I got to see them win tomorrow, but they've actually solved Indiana. So Indiana ain't going to change. They're going to do the same thing, going to try to get Miles Turner on pick and rolls with mismatches. Cats got to understand that and play accordingly. And of course, they're going to have MitchRob out there starting. Yeah, and not only that, you got to also understand Towns and Josh Hart, that 5, they played all the games. So this is the first game this season that they're starting with MitchRob. See, we all been saying, right, that this is the first year of that team together. So like Cleveland with Donovan Mitchell been playing together, this is their 4th season. Boston in their 4th or 5th season with the same crew. This is the Knicks' first season with this crew. And I don't want y'all to forget, because a lot of people start tripping and start acting like the Knicks are a failure if they lose in the Eastern Conference Finals. We was expecting them to get to the ECF. It would be gravy for them to get to the finals. Okay? We was expecting them to get to the ECF. This is the first year with this team. But now that we're here, we might as well get the party started, right? So here we are. Now, let's see if we can get this dub tomorrow. I want to see how Carlisle tries to counter. But now the Knicks got 9-man rotation. Okay? Let's see how he counters that, because I don't know what he's going to do but do what he's been doing. That's what he's going to do. He's going to try to pressure the ball. He's going to try to double team mismatches. He's going to try to isolate Brunson. That's what he's going to do. Okay? Okay. We got something for you now. Y'all enjoy your Monday. Be safe out there. Sure.